This is the way I learned how to use C++ for Godot. Keep in mind, Godot offers support for many different languages, some officially and some non-officially, and sometimes various different ways to set them up. This is just the way I chose for C++, and the one I can explain the best in this video. So basically what I did was pull a template project from GitHub that uses CMake, which was a useful way of learning CMake. This project has a sample game implementation that interacts with the Godot API. So that's another way of learning how to make your own game in godot-cpp. This project I mentioned is called godot-roguelite, and I'll leave a link for it on the video description. I'm going to show you what the sample roguelite template project looks like. So this is how you could have your environment set up in Visual Studio for Windows. As you can see, you can play the game straight from the Visual Studio editor. Some interactive rigid bodies, all in 2D. And now I'm going to show you what I made based on this template project as well. And I made a 3D scene, which is just a rigid body capsule moving around with some props that I placed in the scene. By the way, except for the 3D camera, I did this entirely using the Godot physics server and rendering server, which skips the SymTree/node system and creates physical objects directly. Try doing that with our engines. So coding in C++ like this with Godot is kind of like having loose scripts or loose code files. You can't really attach any of the code to a node. What you actually do is you create C++ classes which represent the nodes. Like the one you see in here, like this character controller inherits from node 2D and it's declared. The godot-roguelite project also has a bunch of framework code already written, so you can do some very interesting stuff like signal bindings. And if we check the main class, we also have a way to create preloaded packed scenes. So I cloned the original godot-roguelite project and made this simplified project, which already works and doesn't have any game implementation or no framework whatsoever. It just works for C++ and has the CMake setup from roguelite. However, I would advise you to follow the rest of this video and check out the godot-roguelite wiki for all the details on how this setup has been made. If you're feeling lazy though, you can just copy this project by pulling it, open it in GitHub desktop. You will need to install these dependencies. So basically just follow this link or just go to the roguelite wiki and you will see how to install most of the dependencies through the use of Chocolatey, and even how to install Chocolatey itself with the GUI version, and then follow these steps in order to install a few libraries that you're going to require, and also download and install Python and install pip through Python. Finally, you also need the CMake and CLang extensions for Visual Studio, which is explained how to install right here. And yeah, that should be it. You should be good to go. You can find in the roguelite wiki the templating article, which explains the same things I'm going to explain in this video, but some of you might prefer to just read them. In order to use godot-roguelite as a project template, one option would be to click here and use this template button and create a new repository. This will duplicate the original godot-roguelite repository and make our own. From there, or from here, we can just click open with GitHub desktop. You can also, of course, use this link to clone the repository through Git directly. I already have it cloned right here, and I make sure that we are in the last push. And I made a copy of it because I will be using this copy as our own project. In my case, I'm making a server, but you can call your project however you like. Let's go inside and delete the Git folder, because this Git folder is from the original godot-roguelite. We will be making our own Git repository inside this folder. Also remove the GitHub and .out folders. And if you don't have Git installed or Git bash, which is actually optional, but it's quite convenient to have Git bash and just click Git bash here and run Git commands from the terminal without having to change our directory manually. We can now run a Git command right here and say git init to make our own GitHub repository inside. I think now is a good moment to show you what some of these folders are for. First of all, the project folder is where the entire or most of the Godot project itself is going to live. We're going to delete the default folders up to the GD extension one, which currently contain a sample game. We're going to change this file name to the name of our own project and open it. And now use the same name for our project for each one of the DLL build names. Now let's go back and open the source folder, which is the folder that's going to contain all the C++ code. You will likely want a main class, which is basically going to be a main node. And well, you will be interested in, or likely will be interested in, reading some of the code around here, but you might want to preserve the API folder because it contains the class you're going to use for registering your own custom Godot nodes written in C++. So I'm going to delete everything except main and the API folder. Now let's go to bcpackage.json, open it and change the name to our own project. And that should be it. Now go to CMake lists.txt. This is basically the main file that's going to run commands for our build. And locate roguelite, switch it to your own project name. I will be uploading a more commented version of this script to the roguelite project, so you can check it out if you want to learn more about CMake. And also this will be the name of our DLL GD extension library when it gets generated. Next thing you can do is go to the project folder and start a Godot project inside it. Okay, now let's open the project once. So make sure to open it once before you try to compile anything or run anything in Visual Studio. Maybe even hit play and run an empty scene. You'll get some errors down here that will disappear once we create the DLL by building the project. So what I'm going to do now is remove the leftover C++ code or the default C++ code that we preserved. So that should be much better and cleaner. Now what we're going to do is open the project from Visual Studio. So let's go to Visual Studio and open a local folder. Select the entire project folder. I already have it here, so I'll just open it. We should see that we have no contents in the source folder for our Solution Explorer. I'm actually using Rider, so you can click on a folder and Control-Shift insert. And I already made, I don't know why it showed up there, Control-Shift insert. And I already made a header file and a source file for new custom Godot nodes. So let's try the header, and I can give it a name, but it's not going to name the class accordingly. We'll have to change all the namings inside. Main. So now we have our main header file, and already generated as it should. Now I'm just going to make a source file. Change the include. Fix all the namings. That should be it. Now, there is a CMake error, which I will try to fix now. But first I'll try to project and delete cache and reconfigure, which is a common solution for missing symbols and other errors. Oh, of course, we're also missing the API folder, which is going to be basically, I'm just going to copy it from another project, which I already mentioned at the beginning of the video. Follow this link and copy the header and body files and just add a new file and call it, what did I call it here? Extension interface. Extension interface. This is gonna be the class where you basically register your custom nodes to class DB, Godot's class DB. And I think this was the header that I copied. Yeah, this is the header, and add a new file, cpp. Go and copy the body, and it's not going to be correct because we're going to have to remove like calling class, which was an example for the project we just copied from, and that should be it. Now CMake stopped, and I don't know if it's going to build. To build, you would use Control B or go here to build, but right now it's not going to work because we can choose between running the game in the editor, which would open the editor, or running the game as the project itself. So basically you can skip the editor and just run the project straight from Visual Studio, which is pretty good. Now if I hit Control B or go to build all, which is basically the same. Let's see if it works, and if we get any errors we'll start fixing them one after the other. Yeah, it does show in red, but building, and see, now it started int assumed. Oh yeah, I forgot to change the name here for this class. Yeah, so make sure your class is all properly formatted with the proper name because otherwise that was just an example class. Control B, and I think it failed again. Yeah, it's looking for an include that doesn't exist, so just remove it from the extension interface. Again, I copied everything because it's quicker. build again. You can, of course, pull the clean project that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And it finished building and there are no errors. So basically, when you open the project and you start seeing everything red, just try to solve the errors, build the project, build the extension, and also try delete cache and reconfigure. This combination of things should actually get most of it fixed. On the roguelite wiki, there's also a troubleshooting section you can follow, and maybe it should solve most of your problems. For example, this one here is quite interesting. You need to disable the automatic CMake script modification, which can actually lag when CMake is doing work on the background. Printing to the Godot console. So the Godot console, you can actually check through the project logs. So each project in Godot has its own folder, which contains some logs, which are the same logs that you can see in the editor. In order to do a print, you first include this right here, and then this for printing. So notice that I'm using a ready case for notification. So this receives many notifications. So one of them is notification ready. There's also notification process and I believe physics process as well. You can also use a ready or process function just like in GDScript. However, I was actually recommended to do it this way for unknown reasons, because the other way also works quite well. And also physics process gives you the delta, which notification doesn't, but I don't know. I'm just doing it this way. It's exactly the same, just a bit more bulky because there's this whole switch case thing going on. Now let's open. This is the morph server that just created. I'm just gonna close it just in case, although hard reloading was introduced in Godot 4.3. Let's try running the editor. So running through the editor. There is no game, it's just supposed to print hello world when we hit play. So that's a good sign, no errors for now. I made a main scene before, and this isn't actually a main node. I need to add the node. There it is. But yeah, I think it should do. I could set it as the root, but I think for this purpose it can just be our child node. Replay, and there it is, hello world. If I were to define this C++ Godot setup, I would say it's a detached CMake traditional way, or at least the one I've encountered more often. I'd never really heard of SCONs until I got into godot-cpp. And I say traditional because I think CMake is the most popular C++ build system in the C++ industry.